Why Angel Reese is more marketable than the WNBA may let on. Why Angel Reese is more marketable than the WNBA may let on.
Okay, this is absolutely wild. Yahoo Sports just published what might be the most delusional article in sports media history, and I'm not even exaggerating. The headline says why Angel Reese is more marketable than the WNBA may let on. But here's the kicker. They spend the entire article talking about Caitlin Clark. You heard that right. An article supposedly praising Angel Reese can't stop mentioning the player they claim isn't marketable. And by the end of this video, you're gonna see exactly why this exposes everything wrong with how the WNBA is being covered right now. But first, you gotta hear what this writer actually said.
In the show, it takes grace, oh, there's that word grace, confidence, and a certain swagger to convey the sensuality and joy that the show is supposed to exude. Stop. You're telling me Cam Brink can't walk in the Victoria's Secret fashion show? Come on, man. Come on. Some people...
Did you catch that? Her stardom ends on the court. Let me break down what's actually happening here, because this is where the whole argument falls apart. The writer claims Caitlin Clark's marketability stops when she leaves the basketball court. Meanwhile, Clark is literally getting paid 6 figures for 30-minute speaking engagements. She's got Stanley Cup deals, State Farm commercials. She's speaking at Goldman Sachs conferences. She's playing in LPGA golf tournaments. But sure, her stardom ends on the court. What blows my mind is how desperate this sounds. You're about to see the writer try to use Angel Reese walking in the Victoria's Secret fashion show as proof she's more marketable. And look, I'm not gonna attack Angel for doing the fashion show. Good for her, get that bag. But here's what nobody's talking about.
When I juxtapose those qualities with who the WNBA, real quick, the fashion show, I'm not gonna attack Angel Reese over it. The fashion show, it had Angel Reese in it, it had Suni Lee in it, it had Madison Beer in it. It pretty much was, if you have some type of notoriety, yeah, you're invited to come. Let's actually put whoever performed in this fashion show in its proper perspective.
It takes grace, confidence, and a certain swagger. Okay, let's talk about what that Victoria's Secret fashion show actually was. This wasn't some exclusive invite-only event for the biggest stars on the planet. Suni Lee was there. Madison Beer was there. It was basically, if you have any type of notoriety, yeah, you're invited. That's not a knock on anyone who participated. But using this as evidence that someone is more marketable than the most watched player in women's basketball history? Come on. And here's where it gets even crazier. The writer keeps using words like swagger and grace and charisma. You're gonna notice a pattern here. Watch how they describe what makes someone marketable.
When I juxtapose those qualities with who the WNBA deems as their meal ticket in Caitlin Clark, it was glaring to me that Clark's stardom sort of ends on the court. Her stardom ends on the court. What about all those Stanley Cups? Okay. What about all those commercials she's in? State Farm, etc. Hy-Vee, etc. Okay.
There it is. I feel most black players were just people who have always moved the cultural needle. This is the moment where the article stops being about marketability and starts being about something else entirely. The writer literally says Caitlin Clark doesn't have the swagger that most black players have. Let me explain why this is such a massive tell. When you can't argue based on actual numbers, ratings, merchandise sales, social media engagement, endorsement deals, you shift to subjective qualities that can't be measured. Swagger, charisma, cultural needle moving. These become code words for something the writer can't quite say out loud. But here's what makes this whole thing fall apart. Remember when Caitlin Clark was DJing at WNBA All-Star Weekend? Remember the live stream after winning the Commissioner's Cup with Sydney Colson? The writer conveniently forgets all of that. You know what's wild? If Aja Wilson did those exact same things, this writer would be calling it a ball of charisma. I'm not making that up. Watch what they say about Wilson.
The ball of charisma that Aja Wilson is. Oh goodness. Is being a victim all the time considered charisma these days? I had no idea. shout out to the Eagles, by the way, is complaining all the time, having charisma. Oh, acting phony and doing the snapping of the fingers and the head snap. That's called charisma. Oh, I get it now. I get it now.
The ball of charisma that Aja Wilson is. Listen closely to how this works. The writer takes Aja Wilson, who spent half the season complaining about coverage, playing victim, doing the finger snapping and head shaking routine, and calls that charisma. But when Caitlin Clark shows personality off the court, suddenly her stardom ends on the court. This is the double standard in real time. Same behaviors, different skin colors, completely different descriptions. And before anyone tries to twist this, I'm not the one making this about race. The writer literally brought up race in their article. They made it the central argument. Most black players have swagger. Those are their words, not mine. What's even more insane is the business reality they're ignoring. You want to know why articles about Angel Reese always mention Caitlin Clark? Watch this closely.
The answer is as simple as the kids say. It just might not be her body. It's not for her. If the league realizes this sooner rather than later, I feel that the marketing the WNBA would be even more fun. Let me just talk about this double.
Ask yourself why an article about Angel Reese starts off with Caitlin Clark and continues to mention Clark throughout the article more than Reese. That's the whole game right there. If you write an article just about Angel Reese, nobody clicks. Nobody shares it. Nobody cares. But mention Caitlin Clark. Now you've got engagement. Now you've got traffic. The writer accidentally proved the opposite of their own argument. This is what's called revealed preference in economics. What people say they want versus what they actually choose. Yahoo Sports says Angel Reese is more marketable, but they know they need Caitlin Clark's name in the headline to get anyone to read it. That tells you everything about who's actually driving interest. And here's what really gets me about this whole situation. The WNBA commissioner, Kathy Engelbert, gets accused of playing favorites with Caitlin Clark. But watch what the writer admits.
The league. Hold on, let me reread that. Much is made about WNBA commissioner Kathy Engelbert playing favorites in the league. Most players in the league tend to think that it's Clark whom she would rather build the league's marketing around. But the ladies of the WNBA understand the true potential that many of them have to continue to grow their league. Wait, yeah, Caitlin Clark is the only person that Kathy Engelbert needs to really think about building around.
Most players in the league tend to think that it's Clark whom she would rather build the league's marketing around. Yeah, no kidding. You know why? Because Caitlin Clark is the only player who consistently moves the needle on ratings. When she plays, viewership explodes. When she doesn't, it crashes. That's not favoritism. That's basic business sense. The writer tries to spin this like it's unfair, like Engelbert should be promoting other players equally. But here's the reality nobody wants to say out loud. Engelbert uses Caitlin Clark to bring attention to all the other players, because if you just talk about the other players by themselves, the ratings prove that most people don't care. That's not mean. That's just data. Let me show you the most revealing part of this entire article. This is where the writer completely gives away their real agenda.
Standard real quick, or this hypocrisy. You let me know the right word I need to use here. Clark and personalities like her don't translate much to off the court, and it's fine. Caitlin Clark at WNBA All-Star Weekend, doing the DJing. Caitlin Clark after winning the Commissioner's Cup, the whole live stream with Sydney Colson. Hey, buddy, if Asia will...
Clark and personalities like her don't translate much to off-court engagement, and it's fine if she isn't that type. Let me list what Caitlin Clark has done off the court just this year. She's been on the Jumbotron at NFL games, MLB games, college football games. She was in the booth with Michael Kay calling a Yankees game. She took pictures with the captain of the Yankees. She was at a NASCAR event with Denny Hamlin. She hung out with Taylor Swift, literally the biggest pop star on the planet, in a luxury suite that became one of the most talked about moments of the entire season. But according to this writer, she doesn't translate off the court. Meanwhile, Angel Reese walks in a fashion show that also featured Olympic gymnasts and Instagram influencers, and suddenly that's proof of superior marketability. You see the problem here? What's really happening is this writer is trying to redefine what marketable means to fit their preferred narrative. when the actual metrics, ratings, endorsements, speaking fees, mainstream media attention all point one direction, they shift to subjective measures. Swagger, cultural impact, personality, things that can't be measured, so they can't be disproven. And here's where it gets even more ridiculous. Check out what they say about the future.
Okay. As much as Clark may have more refined game on the court, I just see Reese excelling through more avenues. I see a bright future for her in movies, commercials, and fashion. Part of my belief in this is simply an inherent swagger that I believe she possesses. Here comes the race baiting. I feel most black players have. We're just people who have always moved the cultural needle. There's precedent as well. When you consider
I see a bright future for her in movies, commercials, and fashion. Based on what? Angel Reese averages single-digit points per game and her team didn't make the playoffs. Her podcast gets a fraction of the attention of anything Caitlin Clark does. Her jersey sales aren't in the same stratosphere, but the writer sees a bright future in movies and commercials. This is pure fantasy. You know how you actually get movie roles and major commercials? You prove you can move the needle. You demonstrate that your name brings eyeballs. Caitlin Clark has done that repeatedly. She's the reason WNBA games are on network television now. She's the reason attendance records are being shattered. That's what translates to Hollywood and Madison Avenue. Proven ability to generate attention. Let me show you the most damning part of this entire piece. This is where the writer completely contradicts themselves.
they don't give a fuck. They care if Caitlin Clark's stardom translates into WNBA ratings. That's what you Angel Reese fans need to be concerned about. Nobody watching her games. Priorities are all messed up over here.
The WNBA doesn't give a fuck if Caitlin Clark transitions into fashion shows. They care if Caitlin Clark's stardom translates into WNBA ratings. Exactly. That's the whole point. The WNBA is a basketball league trying to build sustainable viewership. They're not a fashion agency. They're not a lifestyle brand. They need people to watch the games. And you know what? Caitlin Clark delivers that. Angel Reese walking in a fashion show does absolutely nothing for WNBA ratings. Zero. But the writer wants you to believe that's somehow more valuable than Clark bringing millions of viewers to actual basketball games. The priorities are completely backwards. This is what happens when activism disguised as journalism takes over sports coverage. The writer has a predetermined conclusion that black players are undervalued and white players are overrated, and they work backwards from there, cherry-picking evidence and ignoring everything that contradicts their narrative.
Why Angel Reese catches hate. Basically, these WNBA players better get naked or they won't be noticed. What a dummy. Yeah. Hold up. How many times has Caitlin Clark posted thirst traps on Instagram or whatever the fuck else? No, how many times has Angel Reese done that? Oh, okay. What a dummy! Damn!
Wasn't there something with Caitlin Clark, Denny Hamlin, and NASCAR? Clark gets paid $100,000 for a 30-minute speech. You don't get paid that because your stardom ends on the basketball court. That's the reality check right there. The market has spoken. Corporate America has spoken. Mainstream sports fans have spoken. They're all saying the same thing. Caitlin Clark is the most marketable player in the WNBA by a landslide. But here's what bothers me most about articles like this. They're not just wrong, they're actively harmful to the WNBA. When you publish delusional takes that contradict obvious reality, you lose credibility. When you make everything about race instead of performance and results, you turn off casual fans who just want to enjoy basketball. When you attack the one player who's bringing unprecedented attention to your league, you look petty and self-destructive. The WNBA should be celebrating Caitlin Clark as a once-in-a-generation star who's elevating the entire league. Instead, you've got writers at major outlets like Yahoo Sports trying to tear her down and prop up players who simply don't have the same impact. It's backwards. It's counterproductive. And honestly, it's kind of sad. You know what the real tell is? The comment section under this article. Even casual fans who don't follow the WNBA closely can see through this nonsense. They're pointing out the same contradictions I'm highlighting. When your take is so bad that people with zero investment in the topic can immediately spot the flaws, you've failed as a writer. And here's the thing about marketability that this writer fundamentally doesn't understand. It's not about what you want to be true. It's not about who you think deserves attention. It's about who actually generates attention. Who moves merchandise? Who brings eyeballs? Who makes companies want to pay you millions for endorsements? Caitlin Clark does all of that. The numbers don't lie. Her games get higher ratings. Her jersey outsells everyone else's. She gets invited to speak at Goldman Sachs. She gets paid 6 figures for half-hour talks. That's the market telling you who's marketable. Everything else is just noise. But what really exposes the agenda here is how the writer talks about personality and charisma. They claim black players have inherent swagger that white players lack. That's not analysis. That's stereotyping. It's reducing players to racial characteristics instead of evaluating them as individuals. And ironically, it's the exact type of racial essentialism that progressives claim to oppose. The reality is, Caitlin Clark has plenty of personality. She trash talks on the court. She celebrates big shots. She engages with fans. She shows emotion. But because she doesn't fit the writer's preconceived notion of what swagger looks like, they claim she doesn't have any. It's absurd. And let's talk about A'ja Wilson for a second, since the writer brought her up. Wilson is an incredible player, probably the best in the WNBA right now. But ball of charisma. The woman spent half the season complaining about coverage, acting like a victim, and throwing subtle shots at Caitlin Clark. That's not charisma. That's insecurity. Real charisma is being confident enough to celebrate other people's success instead of feeling threatened by it. The writer also completely ignores the business side of this equation. The WNBA just signed a massive new TV deal. You know why? Because networks saw the ratings Caitlin Clark generated and wanted in on that action. That deal benefits every single player in the league, including Angel Reese. But instead of acknowledging that Clark is lifting all boats, you've got writers trying to diminish her impact. It's like if the NBA in the 1980s published articles saying Magic Johnson and Larry Bird weren't really that marketable, and the league should focus on promoting other players instead. It would have been insane then, and it's insane now. You ride the wave of your biggest star and use that attention to showcase everyone else. That's how you build a league. But here's what I think is really going on beneath the surface. There's a segment of WNBA fans and media who are deeply uncomfortable with the fact that a white player is the face of the league. They genuinely believe, that black players deserve that spotlight more, regardless of who's actually generating the most interest. So they create alternative metrics of success that conveniently favor the players they want to promote. That's why you get articles focusing on fashion shows and podcasts instead of ratings and endorsement deals. That's why swagger and cultural impact become more important than actual measurable success. It's motivated reasoning at its finest. And look, I get it. The WNBA is a majority black league, and there's a long history of black athletes being undervalued and underpaid in American sports. That's a real issue, but the solution isn't to pretend that Caitlin Clark isn't the most marketable player when she clearly is. The solution is to use her popularity to bring more attention to everyone else, which is exactly what the WNBA is trying to